Good morning and welcome to the College of Humanities and Social Sciences seminar series. I am Selma El Marri, an undergraduate student in the literature program. Today we have a special invited guest, Professor Hamza Dodeen. He is a professor at UAEU's own Department of Cognitive Sciences. His research interests including developing and adapting instruments, skills, tests, and educational and psychological assessment. Today, Professor Dodeen will present the effect of positively and negatively worded items on the factor structure, the UCLA loneliness scale. Please join me in welcoming Professor Dodeen.
Frankly speaking, in most of our work, we use the Western scales, instruments, inventories, and so on in psychology, education, and in most of other humanities and social sciences fields and aspects. Sometimes we deal with cultural differences and we take care of this. And today I will present a case that is very common in most of scales that we use, which is having negatively worded items that are worded in the negative direction. For example, the I don't like, I don't know, I don't want, I don't love, my car is bad, my class is not good, my computer is not working, my life is not happy, I'm not a happy person. All these are negative items. So the task now is to see whether wording the items in the negative way will affect the results or not. And I have a case to study as a model, which is the UCLA, University of Los Angeles loneliness scale, which is a very common international scale that's used in many, many countries and in many languages. So first, why we need to include negatively worded items in our scales. The idea behind this is that we need to control on another problem in responding to items, which we call it the response bias. Response bias is when people answer the items without paying enough attention, without careful reading, without even sometimes reading the items. If they tick the answers very quickly, then there is a response bias. Now, to control on this problem, we put some items in the negative direction. So instead of writing all the items I like, I love, I want, etc., so people will tick one direction like agree all the time or disagree all the time. And instead of doing this, we change the direction of some items to be in the negative one. So people here, they have to read because they move from positive to negative. They can't go for one column and tick the items. So the idea behind this is to control on the response bias, and this is a very common activity or a very common procedure that most of the researchers in social sciences and the humanities do when they develop their scales and instruments. I selected this scale again because it's very common and it's used internationally and it has been translated to many languages. The scale has positive items and negative items, 9 positively worded items and 11 negatively worded items. So it's almost half by half. So the goal was to check what is the factor structure of this scale. The original scale in USA was designed to measure loneliness. So there is only one component for this scale. The scale is measuring only one thing. The 20 items are designed to measure only one thing, but they have them in both in negative and in positive directions. So I took a big sample of 2,374 from the college and outside the college, and I give them the scale in addition to some major demographic variables. So these are the sample and the subsamples, and based on age, gender, and marital status, I wanted to study this problem or this structure in details with regard to 3 variables that affecting loneliness, which are age, gender, and marital status. So these are the samples. I found 2 factors in the loneliness scale. Instead of 1 factor as it's supposed to be, as it's in the original design, I found 2 components, 2 factors. One has the positively worded items as expected, and the other one has the negatively worded items. It seems that what I expected here, I got. Items or the direction of the items affecting the results. So negatively worded items come together to make 1 component, and positively worded items make the other component. This is different than the original design, which has only one component. So this example also is or supports the idea that negative items sometimes in some cultures, in some situations, will affect the results because of their wording, because of their direction. These are the 2 components that I got. As you see, all the positively worded items make 1 component, and all the negatively worded items make the other component. Now, what I concluded from this, we have a scale that's supposed to make 1 component, but at the end, it made 2 components. The 2 components are based on the direction of the items of the scale. This means wording the items affect the results, and this means that this scale is functioning in my culture, in my situation, in a different way than it's supposed to be as designed in its original function. Now, what is my explanation to this? What happened when, in my culture, in our culture, when we deal with the negative items? How we deal with the negative items as compared to how let's talk about the original culture of this scale, which is the American culture. Do we deal in the same way with the negative things? Do we act in the same way with the negative things? If we just think and try to compare how we deal with the negative things in our life and how the Americans deal with the negative things or the negative responses in their life. Just 1 simple idea, how we deal with the no situation. When you say no for something, and when the others, with the Americans, for example, say no for something. If I invite you to drink something or to eat something, and you at that moment is full, you don't need, you can't eat. In our culture, what we do? You said no, but do I stop here? Do I accept your no? No. I continue. You have to eat. Come on. Come on. You have to eat. What happened to you? Gradually, you start to change your no. Am I right? Gradually, you know what? I can't. Please, at the end, you accept and come and eat. and drink. Although the first time you said, no, I'm fine. What happened in the other culture? If someone says no for something like this, it is no. It is done. Am I right? No, I'm fine. No further work here. Do you want to eat? Do you like to eat? Do you like to drink? I'm mentioning the food, drink example just to simplify things. But this is the idea about negative and positive direction. So it seems that, as I see it, and maybe we discuss this with you, it seems that our no is kind of easy one. Nice no. We don't mean a strong, solid, final no. We just think, oh, you know, I may change it. Now, what happened when we respond to the negatively worded items? Because of this culture, because of this thinking in our minds about how we see negative things or negatively worded things, we deal with it in different way. I don't like my major. Yeah, but you know what? Let me just go for kind of neutral situation. Although maybe you are in your reality, you don't like it at all. But when you respond, you try not to be very extreme. You not to be very sharp. Your no is soft. Your no is easy, is nice, as compared with the other one, or with the other culture. All right. Having said this, what is the solution for this? The first one is a recommendation that has been observed in many of the recent research about writing or developing the skills. So unless you have a strong reason, when you develop a skill, go for the positive direction. Don't include negatively worded items in our culture. All items should be positively worded, because we deal in different way with the negatively worded items. And this is a huge area for all researchers and students who work with skills in social sciences and the humanities. Okay? So this is the recommendation. Now, we started with the problem. If I put all the items in the positive way, some people don't read it. They just tick the answers very quickly. There is a solution for this. And this is the item number 3. One of the practical solutions is to use what they call it now filler items. Filler items are negatively worded items in your scale just in the responding stage, will not be used in the analysis. So I put in my scale 5 or 6 negatively worded items just for people to make a balance and so they read the answers. But these items will be excluded from the scale when I analyze the results. In this case, I'm dealing in a right way, in a correct way with my culture by having only positive items, and also I'm solving the problem of the response bias by having items negatively worded but will not be used in the analysis. Thank you so much.
I'm Jawahar Al-Subusi, an undergraduate student in the literature program. Today, we have a special invited guest. Professor Arne Kalleberg is a Kenyan Distinguished Professor of Sociology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and has held adjunct professorships in the Kenyan Flagler Business School, the Department of Public Policy, and the curriculum in the Global Studies. His studies labor force issues at the intersection of sociology, economics, and psychology. He has written extensively on the emergence of non-standard work arrangements such as temporary, contract, and part-time work in the US, Asia, and Europe. Today, Dr. Kalleberg will present Precarious Work, Precarious Lives, the Future of Work and Well-Being. Please join me in welcoming Professor Kalleberg and kindly hold your questions until the end of the presentation.
Much of my presentation is based on a book that I have recently published last year called Precarious Lives, Job Insecurity and Well-Being in Rich Democracies. It was published by Polity Press in Cambridge, England. First, let me explain what I mean by the idea of precarious work. Work, as we know, is the production of things of value. Precarious work is work in which the risks of work are borne by individual workers, not by the government or by employers. Precarious work is insecure and uncertain. It provides limited income and benefits, and there is little potential for moving to better jobs. Examples would be work in the informal economy, which is work that's not registered with the government, temporary work, gig economy work, which is now a very important topic in which you work through platforms. Think of Uber or delivery service. And precarious work is also characterized by insecurity, greater insecurity in what we might call regular jobs in the formal economy. So my argument is that precarious work is growing in all industrial countries. Well, in the 1970s, things changed. A number of things happened to make the standard employment relationship no longer viable. There was an increase in globalization as companies became more competitive internationally. Technology accelerated. The microprocessor was invented in the 70s and became a tool by which employers could use globalization to outsource work to different countries. You had political decisions to deregulate markets to make them more competitive. And you had the decline of unions. In addition to these changes in the structure of the macroeconomy, you had changing workers. Continued increase in women workers in the labor force in industrial countries. More education for workers. And immigration. Immigration accelerated during this period. As a result of these changes, you had a shift in the nature of the employment relationship from what I described as the standard employment relationship to what we might call non-standard work. Examples would be on-call or fixed-term workers. Those are different. On-call worker is when you're called to work when the employer needed you. Think of the substitute teacher who is called in to teach when somebody is absent. Or in retail industries where people are called in to work a certain number of hours, but if there's no demand for that worker that day, the worker is sent home. Now, the importance of this is that it shifts the risks of work from the employer and the government to the individual worker. The standard employment relationship was often the basis by which people received unemployment benefits and other protections from labor law, for example. From labor laws indicated that you had to work a certain number of hours for an employer. Well, when the employer has changed, so do these. From the beginning, and from the 1800s to about the end of the Great Depression in the 30s, you had what's called economic liberalism. Here you had the kinds of non-standard employment relationships I just talked about. Workers were very insecure, and there was a great deal of inequality. So what happened? Workers, through unions and politicians, began to complain about this, and they developed protections that led to greater security and protections. Now, if you look at the proportion of temporary work, which is one example of non-standard work, you find there are big differences among countries. Spain, for example, had the highest level of temporary work, whereas the United States had relatively low levels. The reason for this is Spain had high levels of worker protections, and so therefore employers didn't want to hire people because they couldn't get rid of them. In countries like the US and the UK, there was very little protections at all, and so as a result, employers didn't need temporary workers because in a sense everybody was temporary. Now what this illustrates is the importance of labor market protections in terms of dealing with these issues. We also have the specter of automation and routinization, which is changing the nature of work in important ways. And what this shows is that jobs that are routine, either in terms of manual tasks or non-routine manual tasks or routine cognitive tasks, are all declining because these are the kind of jobs that are being routinized and automated. Other jobs that involve working with new information and solving problems that are unstructured, those are growing. So yeah, it's true that automation is happening, but it's happening to certain kinds of jobs and not others. What can social scientists do? I'm a social scientist. I am not an activist. Social scientists need to do three things. Provide basic information on what has happened, and that's what I tried to do today. We have to explain differences in the terms and nature of work on the basis of theories of how labor markets work in different countries, and that's what I tried to do in this book. And finally, we need to suggest policy interventions that would reduce the risks and inequalities in these risks. That step requires political activism and more social movements. But social scientists can play a big role in providing the information so that there's evidence-based policies that are created.